Please welcome Program Co-Chair, Enterprise Connect, and Editor, No Jitter, Beth Schultz.
Good morning, everybody. Looks like we have a good crowd out here. I'm glad you stuck around. As Eric mentioned, we have a great IT executive joining us here this morning, Erin Larry, who is IT leader for collaboration services at Boeing. And she's going to be joining us today to talk about what she's going through in helping usher in digital transformation for end user services at Boeing. Erin?
Hello. Thank you. Right out there.
So, Erin, why don't we get started just with a quick background. What are your roles and responsibilities at Boeing? Tell the audience what your kind of overall responsibilities are in your day-to-day sort of work life.
You bet. So I have responsibility for collaboration services at Boeing, and I have to keep this honest because I see my teammates in the front row there. So my responsibility is inclusive of the collaboration tools that we use to connect people to information. At Boeing, we keep our collaboration services separate from our unified communications and collaboration, which is my teammate Todd Keller, who manages that for us at Boeing. So we have responsibility for tools like SharePoint, for our enterprise portal services that connect us to our suppliers and our employees, as well as some of the smaller tools that we use to manage documents and to provide our enterprise streaming media service, which is growing at Boeing, as you might imagine. And we have 65 people, I think, working on these services, supporting about roughly 160,000 people at Boeing.
Just to make sure the audience heard that, that was how many users you're supporting?
160,000 across the globe.
That is quite a large user base. Quite amazing. When we talked previously, you had mentioned the idea of a digital workplace. Can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by a digital workplace?
Sure. I was remarking as I came into this venue today that this is the place where the Digital Workplace Summit was held, where the idea first came together for us about something we could do with our employee-facing portal as we're planning out its implementation. So a couple of years ago, we were here and we thought, how can we do something that is going to deliver the tools and services that our employees need to be productive in a more seamless and integrated way? And the digital workplace concept was one that we really found compelling. And it's an environment where you can create a place for tools, services, or applications to live that's kind of sticky and customizable, that creates an experience for the end user that can be their own. And it can be customized by location, by job role, by particular interests, and it gives you that ability to really meet the needs of the end user in a way that we can't today. So it's almost taking that same experience that you have as a consumer and applying it to the workplace. It's kind of fun to be here and feel that sort of full circle feeling of the idea being germinated here and then starting down to this year where we're executing on it.
They say magic happens in Orlando. Right?
There you go. I did not expect that, but it wasn't until I saw the dolphins in the entryway that I was like, I've been here before.
So that's your vision of a digital workplace. Mm-hmm. How does that kind of compare to what Boeing employees have today?
What we have today is about 10 years old. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't work. It just means that it feels a little stale. We've modified and adapted it over the years and tried to stay somewhat current. But what we're trying to move toward is something that's a lot more flexible and a lot more agile so that we can do updates kind of on the go. As I mentioned, video or streaming media is something we want to be able to make very simple to do so that if somebody wants to drop a video message on the digital workplace, it can be done without having to go through a third-party group to get it embedded. It's really about trying to free up some of the ways that we need to communicate and collaborate to help transform the business.
How do you do that? I mean, as you mentioned, 160,000 employees. First of all, what percentage of those would have access to a digital workplace? And then how do you assure that, this group, which may love the idea of video collaboration, versus this group, which I hate the idea, how do you make sure that you meet everybody's needs?
Well, first of all, I'll say we won't meet everyone's needs. That's a given. As far as percentage, I would say theoretically everyone should have access to it, but I would say, almost half of our employees are going to be factory-based, so maybe not in front of a desktop or a laptop all the time, but they have shared workstations, so again, they could log in and see their own. Meeting everyone's needs is really not feasible. We're trying to meet the majority of the needs that we can identify. So the key thing about this is that whatever we roll out this year is going to be an evolutionary process. So as we go forward and we learn through feedback what's working and what's not, we can make adaptations fairly quickly because of the way it's designed. And being able to be adaptive like that is going to allow us to take feedback, incorporate it, correct our course, and try to meet more needs. So again, it's not about going out with one big bang and saying, that's it, we're done. I think the one thing that I've read recently is that the true thing about a digital workplace is it is a journey, and the journey continues after you begin the implementation. It's just a matter of refining and improving.
Okay. Now, this isn't exactly Boeing's first attempt at creating sort of a digital workplace, right?
It is not. No, when I took this job 3 years ago, I started thinking about what could be done better and differently. And I had heard about some previous efforts, and I had been warned about some previous efforts, and I thought, I don't really understand what this is all about. I'm starting here and moving forward. But about 5 years ago, maybe 6 now, there was an attempt at putting together a unified workplace for Boeing. And it was designed in a way that was very similar to what we're moving toward now. When I did finally get some of the background on it, I was really quite surprised that it didn't succeed. And I had to say, so what's different now? And I think there's 2 key things that are making this possible. One, we have more understanding about the technology and the ability to put the pieces together in a way that works. But the second piece was really around engaging with the key stakeholders early in the process to get the buy-in and commitment there. And rather than having something come back around that says, here's what we're delivering to you, stakeholders, this is what you get, we started the conversation with, what do you want? And how can we help deliver it, given the technology that we have available? So from that standpoint, I think the difference is shifting the conversation to have that at the beginning and definitely not leaving it to the end, because if you surprise someone with, here's what we're doing to you, rather than with you, it's the likelihood of success is much lower.
So was that, from sort of a cultural standpoint, was that difficult for some of your peers and colleagues in IT to accept that new sort of thinking about how to talk with end users? And then flip side, what did end users think when you came to them and started asking them about their needs?
So to the first point, I think we're making great progress at Boeing. We're really trying to shift that focus to the user experience and having those types of conversations early. I think we're really aiming to be more of a partner with the business and looking for ways to communicate our services in a way that leads to business value for them. So it's been a process for us to have that mind shift in IT, but I think we're doing a really good job. The second part of your question, Remind me what the second part was?
The flip side.
The flip side.
From a user perspective, how have they taken to the idea that you're actually asking them what they want?
I had a good answer for that, but then I got so involved in my first one. So the second part of that is kind of surprise. I would have to say that when we sat down with our key stakeholder, which in this case was the Vice President of Employee Communications, and I very specifically and intentionally did not bring any presentation to that meeting. We sat at a table with a blank sheet of paper and said, tell us what your vision is. And that was very uncomfortable for the people on my team to go through. And it was really interesting to see the response, because he was like, well, gee, no one's asked me that before. And then his next thought was, well, what do we do today? And we said, well, we can bring up today's version and let's look at that on the screen. And then we started looking at, what do you like? What don't you like? How can we change it? And so that sort of design conversation was really novel for him. And to have a stake in the game, I think, really ups the ante, because now he feels invested because he helped create it. And on another side note, we had a call come in from one of our other key stakeholders in communications who said, this is great. I've never actually had IT ask me what I want to see. And I think, that's part of where we can say we're starting to change the dynamic from a service provider, you get what you get and you get it when we're ready, to more of a business partner. So I think those key things are making a difference.
So how do you take that from those discussions with your key stakeholders and filter it down throughout, every last employee?
Oh, it's not easy. I think, so the team that I have, we've got some really great technical people working on this problem. And I keep going out talking about what it's going to be. Then I go back to them and say, can we do that? And the best part is that we work together in a way that they keep me honest and I keep them trying new things. But when it comes to trying to talk to the various stakeholders, I would say that's a good 75% of my job. I meet with, talk with, interact with, really try to get the message out there that we're able to include their voice, try to get their perspective, and to ensure that they're signed up with us along this journey, because there's a lot of moving parts at Boeing, and we don't want to surprise anybody, nor do we want to be surprised later by something that we wish we had known. So we're doing a whole lot of that. So
2017 is your big year. I mean, This is your starting point, transitioning to that digital workplace. So where are you today? You're 3 months into the year.
Right. So we are on the verge of launching our pilot, which will be getting a set of users using the tool to start getting feedback. And that pilot's set to launch the first part of May. And we are not quite ready for it, but we'll get there. And I think that the hope of that pilot is that it will be a way to inform us if what our thoughts were at the outset are the right direction to go. And again, if it's not, then we'll be retooling in the background to get it ready, and we'll take that feedback and make the adjustments. The goal would be to have it implemented and rolled out to users this year. So I'm not setting a date to that timeline, because it could be sooner, but it could be as late as the end of the year. But we're going to take it as the feedback comes. We want to make sure that we're incorporating enough of the basic elements so that when somebody uses it, they feel like their experience is vastly different than it was before, and they can see the difference and feel the value. The worst thing we could do, in my mind, is to go out with something where they say, yes, so what? It's no different than what I have now.
Well, and can you tell us about, from a technology perspective, is this new software that you're bringing in, new platforms?
Sure. Yeah, it's running on the IBM Digital Experience platform, so that is new for us. And we are in the process. It's actually the infrastructure is up and running. We're actually running 2 of our 4 Boeing portals on it today. So we know we've got the infrastructure solid. What we're working on for the employee side is really the user interface. So we're working with IBM very closely to do some customization to have it perform the way we want it to. And that's been not problematic, but it hasn't actually been completely straightforward. So
it never is.
No, it never is. And I think that we're on a good path right now where we've solved some of the bigger problems in terms of layout and adaptability. So I'm hoping that by the time I get back, an early part of next week maybe, I'll be able to see it running on the platform itself, and we'll be able to demo that for our key stakeholders shortly in Chicago.
Okay. Folks, before I address another question to Erin myself, I wanted to remind everybody that we are taking questions from the audience at the end of the presentation. So if you have questions, you can use the hashtag EC'17 and tweet them out, and we will grab those and try to get some of them answered today. Now, Erin, I know that kind of overall, Boeing has this, entering its second century as a corporation, and has grander digital transformation projects going on, elsewhere as well. So where does communications and collaboration fit into that overall scheme?
So to me, digital transformation has a bigger umbrella status. Digital workplace is one component of it, and we're doing digital transformation that is affecting our suppliers, it's affecting our factories, and digital workplace is, to me, the one that really is focused on the employees. So one of the things that's part of our second century endeavors is to really create the era of employee engagement. That's a focus for Boeing, and we want to start getting our employees to come to work engaged, involved, and excited. So part of one of the benefits of a digital workplace is that there is a sense of inclusion and involvement that comes from it. So we look at this as a way to help facilitate that cultural shift toward deeper employee engagement into their work. And that, to me, is where we can really begin delivering. As far as other elements of our digital transformation, they're on the horizon. This could be one of the earliest things that we're able to deliver on. So it's exciting to be a part of it. We're aligned very closely with the overarching digital transformation initiatives, and we're looking to make sure that whatever we stand up can work with future systems as we go down the path in our second century to changing out some of the key things that Boeing uses to be productive.
So you, just to be clear, you are part of the conversation of that overall strategy.
Right, through our CIO's office.
Okay. All right. We talked a little bit about this, but let's explore it a little bit further. People, culture versus technology. Which is the big challenge when you think about digital transformation? Technology
is easy. People are hard. So I think the technology is there. I think we're going to be working that piece of it. The cultural transformation is going to be the big challenge for us. So having to shift how you do your day-to-day things is sometimes a challenge. And we've got a lot of people who've done it their way for a long time. I mean, the platform they use today is 10 years old. So you're messing with 10 years of tradition, so to speak. I think that in my mind, when I think about our employee base, I try to target the engineer that's been in his role a long time that doesn't want you messing with stuff. And when I think of that person, and I know several of these people, I can say, if I can make this guy happy or this woman happy, then I'm going to succeed. But the culture is really changing as we're bringing in all of these new employees who have thrived on collaborative tools in their education and really feel cut off when they come to a place where they can't have that same experience or it's not as easily accessible. So I look at it and say we've got a pretty big spectrum of people we have to please, which is why we're not going to please everyone. But we can work together to change that culture through using our tools to communicate with them, to help educate them, making them customizable. So if you don't want the bells and whistles, you can just pare it down to the things that you need that are pretty basic. So again, it's trying to personalize the experience in a way that isn't you get everything. It's really going to allow for some of that to happen.
One of the points that I forget which gentleman mentioned it during the previous session was that, we've moved from an era of personal productivity to team productivity. Mm-hmm. How does that work when you're allowing customization, on an individual basis? Or do you see it as more of a customization on a team basis?
I think that you can actually have both. So you can have a personal customization on your desktop that is going to speak to the things that are most important to you. But you can also have an entire segment of your desktop devoted to team communications in a way that is not as easy to do today. So being able to have a group chat that's always going to be open on your desktop as part of your teaming is something that we would like to be able to facilitate. And what that means is instead of having to bounce back and forth, you can be on your desktop, see what's going on. If you need to get involved in a chat or a conversation there, you can. And if you need to scroll back to remember what was said before, you can. But it can also be your own desktop that says the things that matter to me most are over here, and these are about the job I have, the location I'm in, and the trending topics that are of interest to me.
Okay. Before we get to some of these questions, I have one last one for you, and that's, when all is said and done, and I know you're early in the process, but how do you plan on measuring success?
So we're going to try starting with a baseline. We're working with Nemerites Consulting trying to get some baseline measures established. We're going to do some surveying of our end users, and we're going to start with this is what is today. We're not going to measure success by the number of people that log on. That's not a good measure for us. It's how are they using it and how deeply are they engaging with the tools in a way that they didn't before. So for us, I think a measure of success is going to be what changes in their behavior as a result of using the tool as opposed to using the tool. We're going to implement it, we're going to deploy it, and if somebody just looks at it and says, yeah, that's not for me, and bypasses it, that's not success. Yes, it's hit their desktop. Yes, they've looked at it, but that's it. If they've interacted with it, they've changed it, they've customized it, they've added tools to it, that to me is a deeper, richer measure of success. So we're going to find those kinds of measures, hook to those, and we've actually brought in a team of consultants that are internal. They're doing this as a special project for us, and they're in one of our leadership programs, and they're going to help us devise what are these measures we should be looking at and how do we really want to look for those success criteria. So that's in work right now.
Okay. It's good strategy to know how you're going to measure as you get into it. Okay. So a few questions from the audience. Digitization seems like it would be good for every business. Have you identified any drawbacks whatsoever?
I think there could be maybe overkill, where people get inundated with too many options. In terms of what we're doing at Boeing, I don't think we are digitizing anything new with this implementation. What we're doing is taking the tools that people use today and putting them in a way that's more coordinated and integrated and allowing for actual transactional activity through this desktop environment as opposed to having to leave the tool, go to a system, do your one transaction and then bounce back. So for us, it's more of a amalgamation of tools than it is actually digitizing things in a new way.
So do you think, and this sort of goes to one of the questions from the audience, but how do you think about the digital transformation process in terms of each job and each usage profile? I mean, are you thinking, we're transforming digitally in this way for this type of user and in this way for this type of user? Or are you letting those users make that decision?
We're looking to let the user make that decision. Okay. We're, like I said, we're trying to design it with the different personas in mind of what they might do with it, but we're not being prescriptive about what they get when it gets implemented.
Okay. Now, Boeing is obviously a very large company. Do you have any advice for smaller organizations that might be tackling digital transformation and a new way of thinking about work?
I would say just think about it in terms of what's going to bring out the best in your people. This is to me about trying to facilitate the best possible user experience when they come in the door and they turn their machine on and they say, I can get to what I need. I can do the work that I have to do quickly, easily, and without interruption. And I feel connected. I feel informed. And I feel like I have the tools I need to get the work done. So it's really about trying to deliver all those things, which are key factors in employee engagement. And as I mentioned before, having that younger user coming in the door that is, very deeply entrenched with collaboration already. It's really about helping them feel like when they're there, they have that sense of community already built in.
Is it wrong for a company, do you think, to engage in a digital transformation strategy without talking to those folks involved with planning the communications and collaboration, the client, the user interfaces? I mean, and if that's taking place, which I think it probably is at some organizations, right. How do you get to that level? I mean, how do you step up and say, wait a minute, let's pull this back and think about what the role of communications and collaboration?
Sure. I don't know that it's wrong. I think there's a lot of different approaches. For me, it felt like those were the kinds of things we needed to do to ensure that we were on the right path and that we had the right buy-in. And that is, I think, part of the consulting aspect that I bring to the table, having been in technology consulting before. You don't want to surprise your client with anything, so being able to ask the questions up front and try to get to that understanding and acknowledgement, I think, was key for us. But I would never say it's wrong.
Okay, well, fair enough. So here's kind of a question you may appreciate or maybe not.
Sure.
After Boeing finishes its digital transformation, what's the next project? Where do you go from there?
Oh my gosh. It's a good question, and I don't know that I've actually gone too far past trying to get, I'm thinking 2 to 3 years out right now. But I would say in terms of what we are doing, we're just seeing a lot of convergence in our technology spaces. We have to be thinking about the tools we use today are going to start melding with other tools that are out there. And how do we prepare for that in a way that is effective for our company and is adding the right user experience and business value? So, we have to communicate all the time. Todd and I didn't do a very good job of that before this conference, so I didn't know he was going to be here. But his space and my space, we need to work very closely together. And as we move ahead in technology, I think we're going to find new opportunities for these convergence paths to be, they may completely subsume what we're doing right now. So I'm trying to be tactical and strategic at the same time, which I sort of equate to trying to dribble a soccer ball down the field. You have to look out, but you have to keep your mind on where the ball's at, too.
And I think that is a great point to end on, Erin.
All right.
Appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us here today. Audience, how about a big round of applause for Erin? I'd like to remind everybody that lunch is out on the event lawn, so please go get yourself a bite to eat and then join us this afternoon.